Yeah, I guess we're live. Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios, Base Castle. We've got 2 cats and a dog, and it's actually really nice outside despite being really dry and getting shocked left and right, and I'm not sure what's going on. Exceptional Radio. You reminded me just how much I've been getting shocked lately, actually. It's one of those, and not just like, oh my goodness, the calamity, but just touching things and discharging some inordinate amount of built-up static electricity. And I'm a sweater guy. I wear sweaters, like multiple sweaters, so I'm asking for it, but not to the point that I should be like creating visible electrical discharge. And at night, it's reasonable, I guess, that I would see it, but I'm not getting what you're experiencing, like daylight, visible electrical discharge.
It's like really bad, and it's not just in my home. We went to Chicago last week, and it was like I'd go to touch the button on the elevator and fucking get shocked. And one time it happened. It was so loud. I turned to the people next to me and I'm like, are you guys getting shocked a lot? And one of them was like, yes. And the other one was like, no. And I'm like, okay, there must be something to that. If, you know, obviously people who have longer, the guy who said no had short hair. So obviously we're carrying more electrons um, with our hair, but I don't know if it's like different people's or people's different slight charges allow them to pick up more loose electrons or whatever it
Oh, I'm
is.
sure it is. I consider my head of hair to be like a radar array. I get like active telemetry from the environment, from the way that I feel things in my head, from whatever it is, ambient electricity, temperature, humidity, pressure. All of these things affect our hair. And so I always wondered, the few times that I've had really short hair, it always felt really strange to me. Like there's an extra sensitivity, of course, because now you can really feel the wind. But also it was like a muted effect.
Yeah, totally. It makes me wonder how much of wizards in ancient history is just people with long hair using static electricity to freak people out before they understood what static electricity was. They would just spend their time rubbing their feet on the ground and just shocking the shit out of people and pretending they were like lowercase d deities and they had magic powers and shit. And I'm like, I imagine that probably worked for a few thousand. I mean, maybe who knows how many thousands of years that worked. And the ancient texts in Latin that we're all wondering what they say that nobody can see unless they go to the depths of the Vatican or whatever the fuck they are, or the Ark of the Covenant, if it actually exists somewhere in Ethiopia, is like just shock the shit out of people and they'll think you're a god, and then
No, there's definitely
after a
something going
while.
on, because every time I touch something now, I'm hearing some crazy shit.
Like voices.
No, like weird grounding noise.
No, I'm just kidding.
I
Like
wish it
weird
was
what kind of
voices.
noise?
Like static grounding noise.
Oh yeah, well it's funny you say that because I've gotten to the point where I've really started to consider if I'm gonna have to like wear fucking rubber gloves around the house, but it's like I started trying to ground myself before I open the door, and it'll work on one, and if I don't ground myself to the next door, it'll just carry the charge between them, and it's like I don't actually lose the charge. I just like pass it through without feeling it, and don't. It's like I'm carrying the charge constantly because this is where electricity is one of those weird things that like the more one understands it, the less one feels like they understand it. In that when you plug a device into like an electrical outlet, as long as the power company has turned on the fucking power, I mean, the electrons that are going to be in your devices or be powering your devices are already here. It just needs the socket to start pushing them through. And it's not even really going to like exchange the electrons as if it's like passing through the way that electrons move. It's like kind of like a river, but not quite. It's more like a like I don't know if you've ever seen when they put those balls on top of a lake where it's meant to absorb the heat. They're like the
Oh yeah, and
black
to
balls.
prevent evaporation.
Yeah, and it's like that's how electrons move more than like the water. It's not quite as free flowing as the water, and it definitely moves, but it's not as like
Oh yeah, my understanding of how electron flow works is way like the whole idea of little balls spinning around in orbits is very crude. Not it's and fundamentally incorrect. It's a field. It's a field that's modulating, and
Yeah.
it's hard to describe that in two dimensions. It's hard to actually describe it without a visual aid because
Well, and it's multiple things too, because there's the magnet. You can't extricate the magnetic field and the magnetic,
yeah.
the magnetism part of electromagnetism. So it's like it's just inherently tied together, um, which is where like I think the alternating current versus direct current is where it makes the conversation even more difficult. Because it's like it's really switching frequencies, but it makes it seem like it's changing the flow of the river or something. It's so crazy on all that, where when we're getting bombarded with fucking particles from the sun, and then it's like affecting those flows of electricity. I could see how humans were manipulated for thousands of years into thinking there was some like magical shit happening. Just because even now, as much as we understand it, there's still some, I mean, even at the highest levels of understanding, there's still gaps. They don't understand it perfectly, or else they would have mastered it to be able to get to
And
type 1 civilization.
even then, science wouldn't proclaim to know anything. You'd be like, "This is what we're working with right now, guys.
Right. They could always improve their understanding.
This is our prevailing understanding at this moment in time."
Yeah.
But we have research that's undergoing review, and once it passes review, it will change our complete understanding of everything.
Well, and I think that's fundamentally where anti-intellectuals participating in discourse about knowledge really pollute the conversation, in that they, in their mind, in their tiny little brains, it's like there's some final point of understanding that one can reach.
You know, here's the funny part to me. I can read as many pages of research, and I can read as many dissertations as are published, and I can even figure out how to attend conferences and listen to the most advanced thinkers in any field are thinking what they're talking about. We can go and experience these things, but to actually participate, we got to get published. Somebody really wants to have their ideas taken seriously, and they're just sitting out there in the I don't know, the cheap seats, the internet seats, observing what researchers are actually doing, thinking that they have a voice. They can go get published and have a voice. If they think it's that easy, then
Right? Joe Rogan makes it seem like it's that easy, though. I think that's the problem.
I mean, obviously, because Joe Rogan has like a PhD and has been published multiple times, and has conducted numerous lectures to demonstrate his acumen in whatever field other than podcasting. He's brilliant at podcasting. He's really good at it.
I don't even know if he's that good anymore. He hit a point of plateau, and other people have gotten so much better. There's podcasts that are like actively solving crimes, and they're getting people exonerated from crimes and shit. Joe Rogan's not doing that. I would not put him on the same level as the true crime podcasts that are using their platforms to actively get people exonerated from crimes they didn't commit while also creating a podcast. That's actually the next level after Rogan. And it's not even, okay, Mr. Beast. I don't even know. I don't know if his stuff would be considered a podcast.
No, that's not a podcast. That's
but like,
that's like
He does.
That's like
He's a content creator.
he's the most benevolent version of a televangelist I think I've ever seen, and he's evangelizing charity and opportunity, and big ups to Mr. Beast. I can't watch his stuff though. It's like,
it's not for us.
no, it's definitely not. When I see
it,
when I see it, it's like, yeah, this is like,
that's completely fine. That's great, actually.
No. I'm not complaining about that. When I see it, it's like,
I mean,
I just can't watch it. But I recognize that he and his team are doing something that's like, that's building a better world. From the top down, because he's working with a bunch of money. I have no idea how they have so much freaking money, but they're doing something with it that's
advertising.
Yeah. Well, they're doing something really good. Big ups to them, but that's not a podcast. I'm not even sure that the Rogan thing is a podcast anymore.
Yeah, I haven't watched. I mean, it's basically like an advertisement that's wrapped in a podcast.
There's part of me, the cynical part of me feels like the podcast really is just a long form commercial nested in a dialogue.
A long form commercial for Manscaped and fucking MeUndies and some other bullshit fucking product that nobody needs.
So counter to that. Recently, I was, dreading the end of support of Windows 10 in 2025, thinking, oh man, what am I going to do with my aging fleet of, more than capable computers, like computers that run Windows 10 like it ain't no thing, and they're all like a decade old, but they don't have any problems. They all run just fine. And so of course my brain's like, oh yeah, well, let's figure out a Linux solution. And meanwhile, I'm also trying to build a machine to run Stable Diffusion, and that's actually going great. But thinking about like alternatives to mainstream operating systems, I dive back into the Linux microcosm and say, what's out there? What's the easiest thing that I can transition these old machines on, so that like my parents won't miss anything, or so that I can just have a stable machine. Can it run Steam? Can it run all the games that I want to play? And oh man, Linux, how old is Linux? It's like 20 years old. And I always read about, oh yeah, it's so great, you can do all this stuff, and in my experience, it's great for like big network administration, like enterprise level network administration, or doing any kind of remote maintenance of a server, or hosting a file server. It's fantastic for a lot of things, but all of those things are basically editing text in terminal. In my experience, I guess I'm sure there's a Linux GUI out there that for all of these utilities that make it real easy and it's pretty and looks like every other main OS 10 or Windows or whatever, but it's still not there. Like, and now of course the coolest looking stuff is being hidden behind a paywall. Unless you're willing to feed through, miles of dialogue to get to the oh yeah, this is how I did this stuff. And so I guess it's like kind of open source. It's out there. If you're willing to read like entire novels to figure out how to install whatever it is to make things a little bit easier. I know I'm complaining about something that I have like a minimal level of interest in. but yeah, I just feel like after all this time, like, why hasn't it become easier to do? So I took possession of a now 3 or 4 year old Dell Precision workstation, and it came with a Platter hard drive. And so I thought, I hate this. Because Windows 11 has, all these weird requirements like UEFI and secure boot and trusted partner module or whatever. And all these things that make it difficult, like cloning a hard drive so that I can have a safe physical backup on hand. That should be easy, but it's really not. And then eventually, of course, after trying everything I could think of, I finally decided I'm just going to create installation media and just install it on a new hard drive or a new solid state disk and see what comes up. And fortunately, Microsoft had already associated the authorization for this computer with my Microsoft account, which I used to sign in the first time, and it authorized it. Like, holy crap, this was actually way less painful than I thought it was going to be. I didn't have to type anything other than, like, password or username and password.
That's one of the best parts about having a Windows account that I've encountered.
Oh my God, it was even more effortless. It had even less effort than in updating a Macintosh computer, in my experience. And by that I mean, like, using installation media, like a DVD, like optical media, or just downloading from an update and just crossing fingers is like, yeah, I don't have any way to recover this thing. Whereas with this Windows machine, I could have downloaded the media creation tool onto any of the other computers that I've got, and just when did Microsoft figure out how to do that so smoothly? When did they realize, oh, like, this can be easy, and then implement it in such a... I have intentionally been, like, holding off on doing any major computer hardware upgrades. Everything I've been running has been, like, essentially a desktop themed laptop, an all-in-one, or a micro tower. And these were great. These were great solutions. The all-in-one is actually one of the best computers I ever had, and the micro tower, it was every bit as powerful as a 10-year-old computer with a GTX 1050. A 10-year-old 12-core, 24 gigabyte RAM Xeon platform. It was every bit as powerful as that. And it could do a few things better. It was a little bit faster, but it didn't do much more than that. It was like I said, it was almost like the same in terms of overall capability as a 10-year-old processor. But I just got a 4-year-old processor and a 4-year-old computer, and this thing it makes the workstation that I normally do everything on seem like it's actually kind of sluggish. And it's not sluggish. This thing's just unbelievably fast. I think it was like a year or two ago, we were talking about NVMe drives, and I was thinking, like, man, the bandwidth on these things is incredible. Who's actually using this stuff? And you provided a few examples, but I just had been using old laptop form factor solid state drives. That was the fastest hardware that I was used to. And so when I finally got some NVMe drives, it's like, wow, these are really fast. But now using a modern system with incredibly fast RAM, and and a 3060 card, which is in my limited, like, 4 hours of not even playing games, is an incredible leap in technology over the 1660 card that I have.
It's insane how much the cards, or how far the cards have come in a short amount of time.
I mean, like a 16 series to a 30 series is like a generation and a half of technology. I feel like the 16 series is like the peak of GTX technology. And so to go to the 3060, which is still, what's was really weird. So reading about Stable Diffusion, I came into a lot of, I guess, anecdotal accounts of people buying like a 4060 card and not getting a big boost in performance of any kind. Like the 40 series cards, unless they're talking about like 4080s and 4090s, are not, getting the 20% bump in performance over the 30 series counterpart that they're supposed to.
Compared, on what?
On Stable
games?
Oh, on Stable Diffusion.
Oh, on Stable Diffusion.
and I think it kind of reminded me of when like the 40 series cards were released and they were just like terrible at mining. Whatever Nvidia did to make like the 30 series, the last really good cards for mining, like it
Well,
has
there's a sweet spot for power consumption
yeah,
versus like
what you actually get.
processing power. And yeah, and I think the 30 series was, I don't know if that's necessarily the peak until there's like another microchip revolution, but yeah, I didn't see any, all of the 40 series reports were saying that none of the improvements on any of the cards were that much higher to the point of it being worth buying a 40 series if you already have a 30 series. And then because the market already had the 30 series, Nvidia fucked themselves over by putting a card out before or after the scalping had dried up. So it's like because they caught up supply, the scalpers couldn't continue to exploit that gap. And so people could just buy a 30 series off from a store if they were wanting a new card. It's like smarter to go buy the cheaper 30 series that gets the same performance than the 40 series. And that's Nvidia's fault for oversupplying the market. And now because the AI bros have pushed this narrative that they need all the cards, they're just trying to make a GPU rush again. I see what's happening. They did it with crypto. They're trying to do with fucking AI again. They're trying to make it seem like, oh, if we just have a trillion fucking GPUs, then we'll hit AGI. And that's when we'll get the breakthrough in AI that we need. And it's like, no, it's not going to be the number of GPUs. This is the same fucking approach to problem solving that capitalists always use.
Let's just throw more
GPUs?
money at it.
Just throw more money and more GPUs at the problem, then fucking AGI will happen. And it's like, no, that's not the issue at this point. And obviously, there are hardware limitations that need to be overcome. But just throwing more GPUs at the problem isn't going to solve it either. And I think that's where it benefits their narrative if it were that easy to solve the problem. So I think that's why they try to sell that narrative. But I think people want to believe the universe is that logical in sequencing. It's like, oh, if you buy GPUs for AGI, then we'll get AGI. And it's progress is so not linear, but people just want to believe it's linear. I think it's like a religion.
Man, if progress were linear, we'd be doing something a lot different than this. I think humanity would have gotten a lot further in 240,000 years, 400,000 years.
Yeah, it's like it's funny to see
It's like a
all of the
series
different
of plateaus with occasional improvements.
right, but I think it's also seeing what has to coexist at any given moment. Knowing that the population was below 10 million human beings on the planet at some point. Um, Even if it was only 10 million, you can be guaranteed at least 100,000 of them are going to be just absolute douchebags of human beings for no reason. And that's just enough to make things like not utopian. And it's always having to deal with the extreme fringes being the most visible and the most they're the ones that want to impose their influence on people's lives the most. And I think that's where no matter what the population is. I think that's something we're always gonna have to deal with. But it feels like, I mean, I don't, obviously nobody knows, but it seems like for like the last 6,000 years, the West has had a real problem with those people. And it tried to develop law and order to put those people in check, but then started, those people started using law and order to subjugate once again. So I think that's where knowing history and knowing world history makes it a lot easier to not get so isolationist in one viewpoint, in that, like, yeah, America sucks for a lot of reasons, but the rest of the world exists and it's not all like this. And there's like better places for certain things and there's worse places. And on that spectrum, I think it's really easy for Americans who've never gone outside the country to get all up on a high horse of like, we're better than everybody else. And motherfucker, you don't even know. You don't know shit about anybody else. So like, I don't even entertain that person's opinion. And I think that's where we have to like stop entertaining uninformed opinions in America, especially, but I think the world, anywhere in the world, shouldn't really be entertaining anybody who's like not willing to put in a little bit of time and effort into learning about something before they develop an opinion on it. And the funny thing about it is, I was thinking about this the other day. I've known you over half my life at this point. We're good friends. I would dare say we're like brothers. And one of the things I was thinking about is like, what makes it easy for people not to like get mad at each other? And I was like, we just don't discuss things with each other that we don't know about. And it's like, I'm sure you have an opinion about Israel. I have an opinion, but I know it's not informed enough to like put it out there. There's a lot of things I understand about it, but I don't understand enough for me to feel comfortable putting my opinion about out there. And clearly you don't either, because we haven't even talked about it. So I think being able to like have those things exist and not even bother to bring it up, not because we aren't thinking about them or have opinions about them, but deep down, you and I both know neither one of us don't know shit enough about any of the fucking shit that's happening over there to have an opinion beyond like, I don't like people getting killed. I don't like kids getting killed. I don't like adults getting killed in any theater. So like, it's not going to be any different there, period. So like, I don't, anything beyond that, I can't really like comment on the formation of Israel or like whether it has the right to exist or all these other things in terms of like, I have opinions about them, but I know they're not informed enough for me to put them out there and feel comfortable being like, oh, I'm going to put my name on that because I could learn something that changes that specific opinion at any given moment. So I'm not going to like hard stamp that opinion. I don't know what happened where people thought it was okay to just like spitball opinions and just throw them out. What about this? Let's play devil's advocate. What about this scenario though?
And
what if it was the apocalypse?
It's tough because everything that I read about it makes me mad. Like when I read about the history of Israel, it makes me mad. But when I read about the history that precedes Israel, it makes me mad too. And then next thing I know, I'm reading about things about England that I should be mad about again, or the rest of Europe. And it's like the worst rabbit hole because it just keeps going and going. And next thing you know, you're reading about ancient Mesopotamian shit. I don't know anything about Sumeria.
And you know what the worst part about that? The worst part about that rabbit hole, the absolute worst part, you can't do shit
Nope.
about it. You can
Nothing.
go down that rabbit hole all you want, and at the end of it, you're just gonna be fucking absolutely useless and depressed
And
because you can't
frustrated.
do anything to change any of the things you just ingested. So like that's where I'm of the mind that like I don't think people should necessarily have to learn about things that they can't do anything about. And like, so for example, the Holocaust, there's a lot of things people can do not in response to something that has happened, but to prevent that from happening again. So like it's definitely not a useless endeavor for people to learn about the Holocaust. So like I wouldn't, it's not all historical events and not because something is in the past that it would make it like, oh, you don't need to learn about that because it doesn't apply to you. There's there's a lot of information that's happening in real time, and like the further one gets from one's own local city or town or wherever you one happens to inhabit, the less likely one is able to actually affect or impact the information or the people within the thing that the information they are reading
The thing
is
that
giving them.
really that
So,
gets me, of course, is that like, of course, it would never happen. But if one of our neighbors that we had a border dispute with decided that they were going to attack, like, say, New Mexico, the United States would go absolutely crazy. They would just, unleash the fury. And so there's part of me that's like, yeah, sure. I mean, I can understand why the Israelis are unleashing the fury. But then there's also the part of me that's like, yeah, there's also humans on the other end of that fury, and they're like not responsible for this shit. So it's just like a bunch of really mad people like unleashing the fury on a bunch of people who have, they're just getting murked left and right. And next thing you know, my sympathy is spread so thin that I don't even know what I'm sympathetic towards. And it makes me apathetic to the situation because I can't see anything because it's obfuscated through the lens of the media. And not to say that the media is feeding me bad information, but it's still happening on the other side of the world through numerous cameras and screens and passing through untold amounts of handlers. And we don't have access to, like, the Army's Overwatch network. We can't watch what they see. We're not a part of that that information system. It just doesn't exist for us.
oh, and on that note, I don't think people have an unlimited supply of empathy or sympathy. So if you have exhausted your empathy and sympathy for the day before you even leave your house, by the time you see a homeless person, whether it's a child or an adult, you don't have enough empathy left to extend to that person. And I think that's where it's like, it really actually exacerbates the disconnect within a community because people are so busy extending their empathy and sympathy to places that only exist to them as abstract concepts, even though these places are real.
Yeah, I
To
was
the
just about to
people,
say, like, I know
of
Israel
course
is a
they're
real
real.
place. I
Yeah.
know I could find it on a map or a globe with very little effort. I could tell you exactly where it is, but I've never been there.
Sorry, go ahead.
I've
having
only seen pictures of it.
having been in a place that was being covered by the media as being in turmoil and knowing the dissonance between what's happening on the ground and what they're portraying, it's just an abstract concept because they're not showing you, they're censoring a lot of the worst. And even if you're seeing what you think of the worst, it's still not even at. And so
No, they're not showing us the worst of it.
it's like it's glimpses in these abstract concepts of what's happening. And I think it's really dangerous for people to get wrapped up in those things on whatever side. But I don't know if they really have a choice when they're constantly being inundated with this stuff, because to them, not not getting into those arenas of social media is not really an option. Um, like, because social media has become such an integral part of everyday life, not getting on social media is not an option, I think, for probably like 70% of the population. And then FOMO starts to kick in. So those 70% never leave. And then the other 30% either experience FOMO and like eventually cave, or they pretend they make part of their identity not being on social media so much that like they might as well be, because they end up discussing the downfalls of social media so much that it's like they're still talking about social media. So I think this is the same issue with like atheists and Christianity, or not atheists. People who make their identities about atheism are still usually inherently make their identities about Christianity. It's just making it about countering Christianity and all the counterpoints. So it's like, that's fine, but a lot of them are not self-aware enough to realize what's happening in those situations. And so I think that's where social media exists. And like, it's not an abstract concept because it exists, but to people who don't participate in it, it's this abstract concept where either everybody is constantly posting selfies and it's the most extreme egotistic narcissistic realm, or the other place where people think it's like this platform where you can actually affect social change by like, if you just make the right post, then world peace may achieve. Now, they made a SNL skit about that before fucking Louis C.K. was ousted as a pervert. But I think that skit only cemented the idea that had been in the zeitgeist of like, certain people thought, yeah, if you just made the right post at the right time, it would go viral and then like world peace. And it's like that mindset, I think, kind of laid the groundwork for the influencer to emerge as a position. Because like 2004 to 2000, maybe 10, nobody was describing themselves as influencers, or like that wasn't a job. And then once social media showed it wasn't going to go away, then the people who had monetized the platform started to like monetize their formulas of how they monetized, and it worked for enough people that then we got a wave of bot driven influencers before people understood how bad the bot problem was. And then I think you got a lot of people falling into waves of manipulation via bots, whether it's through crypto scams or through chat bots pretending to be like a woman that's interested in a guy who doesn't get a lot of interaction with women. There's all kinds of bots that were being used to like attack people and the economy. And there was at least 4 or 5 years before anybody in power enough to do anything really caught on to it. And I think that's where a lot of the trends that happened between 2010 and 2015, 95 to 99% of them were not organic. But because people hadn't figured out the tricks of the trade yet, it was impossible to know what was organic and what wasn't. So I think people still look back on that period and think of the shit that emerged as like having some organic um like so okay, Soldier Boy, for example. I heard Superman, that hoe, playing in an ice cream store
What?
with a lot of children in it, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I'm like, I don't know if he used bots to get himself, I'm sure he used them to get himself to a certain point, but he made enough music that people liked, whether one thinks it's good or not. Enough people still sing Soldier Boy songs where I'm like, he's not the same as like Little Xan or Little Flip or any of the little whatever that came out of that period, because there were so many little insert name here generators that like I think people started to, if somebody named themselves Little anything, nobody was going to listen to it anymore because there were so many little somethings. I'm sure somebody has a rap name named Lil Something too, which is like there's just too many of them. So at that point, we know like Lil Xan and Lil Peep had bot driven traffic to make them seem more popular than they were, because when they fell off, they had like meltdowns and implicated as such because they wanted to make it seem like, oh, this is an industry problem, when it's like, yeah, the industry does it, but when people have music that the audience actually likes, it doesn't matter how it got out there. Like it'll persist. So I don't, any of the stuff that came out during that time, almost none of it is being listened to now. So that's where I'm looking at the way people ingest media over time. And time definitely has good judgment about what people like. It's not necessarily if it's quality, but time will tell what people like generally. And I think that's where a lot of 80s and 90s media gets held on to for nostalgic reasons, but a lot of it's just better because studios were willing to take more risks and not put budget limits. Like it was a very unique time when creative endeavors were not getting the same type of budget restrictions that now go along with big budget films or big budget video games or something like that. It's like a big budget is a huge risk, but it has to be a safe bet in order for there to get a big budget. Ironically, which is, it's the most counterintuitive, nonsensical existence for things to be made. But that's also why during the 80s and 90s, that nonsensical framework hadn't really been established yet, because they hadn't had enough successful blockbuster franchises for them to establish in their minds a formula for success. And I think that's one of the big issues, is like Motown isn't necessarily the first, but it's one of the most prolific industry leaders that was able to establish a formula for creative output that also enabled the creators enough artistic freedom for the outcome to be unique enough within the formula that the audience didn't care that they were using a formula. Every studio isn't able to pull that off. And I think that's where people still talk about Motown, because it kind of set a standard. Def Jam was able to pull it off for a while. They're not able to do it anymore. Empire or Epic was able to do it for a while, not able to really do it anymore. So you can go Universal, you can go down the list, Sony, they can pull it off. And in their minds, it's like them being specialists and knowing what they're doing. But in reality, it's like luck, or not luck, opportunity intersecting with the right timing, with them happening to have the skill. And like, it may feel like luck, but it's really just the numbers playing out and a person happening to be there when the numbers play out over time. And it's like that individual, it looks like or feels like luck. But then some people can internalize that as like skill. And I think that is what happened with business, industry being imposed on creative endeavors, because it's like when they are getting successful with a franchise, in the real world, it's impossible to know why that success emerged. We know that the success happened. We have the quantitative accumulation of ticket sales or record sales or whatever it takes to say, oh, this record went platinum. That's what we're defining as success. Oh, it went double platinum, triple platinum, 10 times platinum. Now the success bar for quantitative accumulation keeps going higher, because over time, that's all it can really do. But there's still no, it takes time to understand how those things have cultural impact beyond just quantitative sale. And I don't know if people care enough about those things, or care about understanding those things, to know that's why they shouldn't worry about what kids listen to today, because that's what people were worrying about 30 years ago. That's what they were worrying about 50 years ago, 70 years ago. That's always what they worry about. But the shit that they're listening to when they're kids goes on to either prove itself to have merit, or it gets lost to history. So it's like, there's no reason if you read enough or understand enough, there's no reason to get weighed down by the impediment of the moment, because the trajectories are generally moving in positive directions. Even with like, the funny thing about war is like, it tries as hard as it can to kill humans, but our population is growing regardless of if we have war as a species. Like, war can try all it can to wipe us out, but we persist like fucking cockroaches. So like, on the one hand, it's really easy when we're inundated with images of the people that are at war and are the ones fighting, to forget that there's like 7.9 billion other people that aren't at war. And it's easy to not think about those people because they're just living their fucking lives, whether they're struggling to get by or not. They're still just not like out participating in war or something, on an aggressor side, in that most people are just getting by or living day to day. And because that story isn't sexy, we never get that story of like the 7.9 billion human beings who may have problems, but they're not fighting. They're not picking up guns or picking up weapons or under fire. Because I'm not definitely not blaming people who are under fire, who are in an asymmetrical warfare situation, because that is not just, that happens in many places. Like, that's what's happening with the cops in America. So it's like, it's not just with black people. It's like everybody versus the cops. So that's asymmetric warfare. that we have to deal with. And we can't even not call it warfare because they've been militarized at this point. So like there's so many things about there are escalations, de-escalations, progressions, regressions, and all of those things are in this kind of like soup of coexistence where certain people will feel like they can like take a bowl of that soup, put it on the stove and heat it up to the perfect temperature. But that's not how the world works. Like you can't isolate unless you're in a lab then, but that's no longer the real world. So like I think when we're living in that quantum soup, because it's so chaotic, the desire to not feel like we don't have control over that is so strong that people will definitely delude themselves into thinking that they did something and didn't just happen to like the dominoes. They set some of them up. They pushed one of them over, but gravity had to exist for the dominoes to move like that. And they can't take fucking credit for gravity. You just had to be born on a planet with gravity. And so it's hard to know when to take credit for something or to like acknowledge that one is benefiting from circumstance. And I feel like the more one understands benefiting from circumstance, the more they can do it, which is why those people seem to be able to like quote unquote succeed more. But I think that's a matter of like not asserting oneself over or not trying to assert oneself over the flow, because ultimately the flow is going to win. And I think that's where like you can move yourself within the flow to get away from places you don't want to be, but it's never going to stop. And I'm not trying to be too like existential so much as like executives, if they were as smart or accurate and as useful in their positions as they think they are, then nobody would ever have a problem in a business. As long as they had an executive or a group of executives, then they would just be able to work it out. There'd be no situation that those people with that accumulation of knowledge and experience wouldn't be able to figure out. But that's not how the fucking world works. So like, I don't know how long it's going to take society to get rid of executives. And I think, ironically, like the biggest thing that's going to make people finally sick of executives is them ruining creative properties. Like everybody saw Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2, and then the shit show that was 3. And then we're going to see the reboot with what we hope is less executive control, but who knows what the end result will be. I feel like Eddie Murphy's got enough clout where there won't be any executive notes that get implemented. Who knows? Everybody who works with corporations are subject to those executive notes. Whether they take them, I think, is a matter of how established one becomes. So that's where I'm like, on the one hand, if we'll see with Grand Theft Auto 6, if Grand Theft Auto 6 sucks, which, you know, it very well may. It may just be a shit show that looks good in
Man, I'm sorry.
2 minute
Eddie Murphy can
increments.
field 2 basketball teams.
Oh, are you looking at his kids?
He's got 10 kids. That man is
Yeah.
prolific. Woo-wee.
Yeah.
They're gonna be able to have family basketball games. Like, they get the cousins involved. They can play. They have enough people to play hockey. 2 full hockey teams. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
Oh, no worries, man.
Oh man, Eddie Murphy's one of those actors who he made a bunch of really strange movies that I just couldn't get into. Like Nutty Professor, I didn't. That wasn't for me. And what other movies has he made that I don't even recognize? I have no idea what Norbit is. I think he was really good as the donkey in Shrek. I don't know what Candy Cane Lane is. Daddy Daycare sounds like a mistake.
So he made a movie with Robert De Niro called Showtime, which at the time it was horribly received and like nobody saw it. But I bet it would actually be really good now. Because there's certain things where like Eddie Murphy was just too ahead of his time in like life. I don't know if you saw that, but it was a very dark comedy, and it was like I think one of the better dark comedies that got made when they were trying to do all that dark shit. Um, there's funny parts. It's definitely not the premise isn't really funny if you think about it too long, but the way that he's able to like turn the one of the darkest premises into something funny, it's like okay, I get what he was trying to do.
Ooh, got a
And it was executed well.
25% on the tomato meter with a 25% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Life?
Showtime.
Oh, okay. Showtime. Yeah, I feel like that's probably from being in their minds because like, well, I mean, I guess I haven't watched it in a while.
Oh, the tomato meter only got 122 reviews, and the audience score is based on 25,000 reviews or ratings. I don't know how much. I know that Rotten Tomatoes is a strange place. It's like IMDb. There's like some anomalies. Like I think Terminator 2 is one of the highest rated movies of all time.
uh, I mean, it is. Okay, let me say this. James Cameron is definitely one of the most overrated great filmmakers. He's a great filmmaker, but he's also overrated at the same time. And I think it's partially because the marketing around the movies he's made has like transcended other marketing. Um, and also the properties have grown into other media forms. So like people have played Terminator video games, or like there was like an arcade game for Terminator 2 that anybody who grew up in that period and watched the movie probably played at some point. So or the pinball machines. There's so many things that made that movie ubiquitous that it gets elevated in people's minds in ways that it probably should.
Okay. Here's an example.
Not to say that it's a great film.
I found the
It's not
100
that
Club
good.
of Rotten Tomatoes, and so Seven Samurai, which is one of my favorite movies, is number 15. Toy Story is number 12. Let's see, what else do I recognize on this list? Man on Wire, number 3. Toy Story 2, number 2. number
It feels like man children made this list.
Yeah, to this is I don't accept this list.
A dad list. It's a dad list.
This is like a list for no, some of the movies are like actual like films that
Seven Samurai. Not that should be way higher than 15.
I know, that's what I mean.
Nah, bro, you can't have Toy Story above that.
You can't have 2 Toy Story movies above Seven Samurai.
Hell no, no. I don't. And see, that's where I'm like, those opinions should just be thrown out. Anybody who came to those conclusions, nobody should ever listen to them about anything ever again. Like, oh, they said it's gonna be stormy out. I don't care. I'm not gonna listen to it. I'm not gonna listen to them about anything. Not the weather. Definitely not movies.
Okay, it's Terminator has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's number 28. I knew it was one of the Terminators had a perfect score somewhere.
The first one or the second one?
The first one.
I mean, like, just thinking about the intro theme song that was done with tape loop, where it's just like not. I think it was. I don't know what the fuck they did. I think it was tape loop. Whatever it is, not good. It's not bad, but there's certain issues where you're like, you can't let nostalgia overwrite one's understanding of, like, they did some amazing practical special effects. They're definitely not perfect. For the time, they were great.
Oh yeah, the skinning of the hand. Oh, I don't think of that. That's T2.
No, there was that they did the face one.
That's right.
In T1, and it was not.
It was crude.
It was not realistic. Yeah, it didn't look realistic then, but it was good enough above the rest of what had been made to be like, oh, this is great. It definitely doesn't hold up now. But that's where I'm like, go look at Jurassic Park. A lot of the stuff in the original Jurassic Park holds up. Some of it doesn't, especially like the outdoor shit. The outdoor shit looks, or the daylight outdoor shit looks way worse. But the indoor stuff, a lot of the indoor stuff still holds up today in ways that Terminator or Terminator 2 kind of does. Terminator 2 had better special effects, but certain parts of it just felt too contrived to be like.
I mean, it's Terminator. The whole thing is really contrived.
Of course. But I mean, like the part where he like stole the clothes.
Oh yeah.
And then he like
your
dropped
boots,
the line again.
Your clothes and your bike, give them to me.
And it's like, okay, I get what the writer had to do for the sake of a commercial or whatever, but just make the commercial and leave that on the cutting floor. But then they did that shit too much to the point where they had to start making laws about what was in the film commercial versus what was in the final cut. And I feel like a lot of that had to start. It started with Terminator 2 because they put too much of the film in the trailer. And once people saw the film and realized like how much of the film was in the trailer, they started thinking that like you can watch a trailer and lie about seeing the whole film. And in many cases, you could kind of just guess where it was going because they had made them formulaic by that point. And that's where the M. Night Shyamalan started. I don't know if there's more than one of him, but the notion of trying to then do a twist ending because there was that formula that people were trying to then overcome became another issue. So it's like,
Yeah, but the M. Night Shyamalan movies, you can only watch them one time. The only one that
right.
doesn't have it, the only M. Night Shyamalan movie that doesn't have a twist is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
And that's the only one that I've watched more than once and enjoyed to the same degree twice. Speaking of Airbender, there's a new live-action Airbender on Netflix that involves Nickelodeon, and it's fantastic.
Oh, is it out?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen all the marketing for it. I just didn't.
At
I
first,
never really got into Avatar for whatever reason. I don't know why. So
I didn't get in. I didn't get into Avatar until I was an adult. I was too old when it came out, and then I'm not sure why I watched it, but it's one of the best cartoons. It's fantastic, and they put a lot of effort into at least the cartoon. They put a lot of effort into accurately drawing martial arts, although albeit with fire and water and earth and wind. But the live action, they did a lot of. They took the cartoon and just made it live action. And so there's a lot of really satisfying moments. And in 8 episodes, they wrap up book 1. So it's like 8 hours of Avatar movie, basically. Their Last Airbender movie. It was good. I highly recommend it to anybody who enjoys that story. Also visually, it's gorgeous, but it's definitely. I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who didn't already like Avatar. And we're not talking about James Cameron's Avatar. I'm not recommending that movie ever again. That second shit show was enough to just. I don't even remember what the second James Cameron Avatar whatever movie was about. That's how terrible it was.
I wish more properties would just do that.
Make a sequel that was so bad that we could just forget they existed almost. Or just know not to watch it again.
Where it's like just disappear into obscurity. Like, what was it? The Daredevil movie. It wasn't even that terrible, but it's like one of those things I feel like people forgot. It just kind of faded into the background and people forgot it existed.
You know, Ben Affleck proves that Daredevil and Batman are the same person.
Basically.
But also, that movie spawned Elektra, which was terrible.
Well, and it's like, I don't think it did that well to get a sequel in the first place.
Or a
which I feel like, spinoff.
Sorry.
But that's where I'm like, that there was this period and and Catwoman, there was certain things where they just took risks that they shouldn't have, and then some executive made some notes that they shouldn't have, and it came together to be a massive failure. And then none of the executives took responsibility for their part of the failure. And I think we kept persisting with those types of like creative amalgamations of outputs. And that's one of the places where James Cameron has set himself apart by not allowing executives to ever hijack his films, because that's where he hasn't even made that many films. So he's prolific in his output as a franchise creator, but as far as actual number of films, it's not that it's quality over quantity, which I think what's his name, Quentin Tarantino is one of the other ones that's along those lines. But
Yeah, he's only going to
there's
make
not
10.
where there's not that many people who are willing to take that approach, and I think that's um I can't point at any specific reason why, but it's like where somebody who's willing to sell out their creative vision on a sequel because they don't actually care about the creative vision that much not to sell it out, there's enough of those people to then make it difficult to know if the franchise we're seeing or the thing that we're seeing is meant to be turned into a franchise and that was what it was what its goal always was, or if it's something that
Oh
has
man, he's
love in
producing
it.
3 more Avatar movies.
Yeah, that's what he's focused on for like the next ever. Because they're making video game spin-offs or
It's not that cool.
yeah, I don't know. I still haven't seen any of them or played it. The video game looks okay. It just doesn't look good enough for me to like take out of some other video game I could be playing to play that.
Maybe
Which,
maybe it's a way to. I mean, I'm not. Who's the audience for Avatar?
I don't know. I just don't understand. I don't know anybody really talking about it. Um, which always makes me wonder if it's like the last of the.
Oh. So it's a 56% male audience, with over half the audience, 57% being between the ages of 18 and 34.
This feels like maybe this is the last of the bot influenced audiences. Because the Spider-Man man children are one of those too. They'll like go see a Spider-Man movie 5 times if a bunch of bots tell them to, or the Zack Snyder cult. There's a few media associated cults that are left that will do anything that bots tell them to do. Um, Surprise, surprise, they're all full of men or boys, man children.
And they're going to defend SpaceX until the end of time, too.
You never find any women in these groups. It's really crazy.
Oh, no. Isn't there? There's a woman who got a job with Elon and produced children with him, and they never even dated.
Yeah.
So there are a few women in those cults. They exist.
Oh, I mean, no. That woman is like one out of
outlier, total outlier.
Yeah, no, she doesn't represent any sort of trend. And that's where I'm like, oh, there's so far 2 women who have created offspring with Elon Musk in a means or are willing to admit it. There's only 2 women so far who are willing to admit that they created offspring with Elon Musk purely for the sake of what they believe to be his cult influenced ideals. So like that's not actually that many. That's compared to like the number of people who Jimmy or like Lenny Kravitz has probably slept with. You know what I mean? It's Lenny Kravitz ruined a relationship with Lisa Bonet because he was sleeping with too many women. That's not Elon Musk has never approached anywhere near that level of like slanging dick or like as much as he's a billionaire cult leader, 99.99% of his followers are dudes that want to fuck him. And if he could even remotely be like Lenny Kravitz, he would. but he can't. And there's only 2 women that have succumbed to the cult. And that's where I'm like, if Elon Musk looked like Lenny Kravitz, do you know how many women would be in his cult harem that were like willing to carry his offspring? You know what I'm saying? And like people want to act like that's not the reality of like Elon Musk has had $200 billion and he could only get 2 women in his harem. That's fucking sad. And that's like, if you're going to try to have that, like, oh, I'm going to impregnate women and repopulate the earth, a 2-woman harem with $200 billion is the saddest thing in fucking human history. Like, he did all that. And like, one of them is
an employee.
Grimes? I mean, I'm not about to like shade anybody. I'm just going to say, for somebody who's as wealthy as she is, she looks like she smells like bad. Some people look like they smell bad through like a screen where I'm like, oh God, I know white people the way they look, and that woman hasn't taken a shower for like 3 days or maybe longer. And a lot of times, and you can't like cover that shit up with makeup, and you can spray perfume on top of it.
You also can't like, fake that look either.
No, you can't. You can't. And this is the shit that the nobles were doing back then in the Victorian age. So like, why would they stop doing that shit now? Like, Elon Musk clearly doesn't care about his hygiene or his health. The motherfucker walks around with cat whiskers and like looks like a goddamn catfish half the time. If I had that much money, I would employ somebody to make sure that I didn't walk around with like a nose hair, let alone some fucking stupid cat whisker looking motherfucking shit on my face. So it's like, I wouldn't, and not that I would be too good to shave my own face. I would literally hire somebody to be like, hey, I don't want there to be pictures of my nose hairs out there. And sometimes I forget, like I'll think about cutting my nose hairs, but I'll do something else and forget. Can you make sure to tell me to cut my fucking nose hairs? If you can see them, tell me to cut. I would pay somebody just for that specific fucking purpose. But no, this goddamn dude out here looking like a fucking walrus, like an unshaven walrus that can't even grow a fucking beard.
Man.
And so like, of course he can't fucking get more than Grimes and some other unnamed crazy lady in his harem because he looks like a goddamn walrus, of course.
Ray Charles had 12 children with 10 different women, and B.B. King had 15 children with 15 different women.
Let's get back to Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy has had way more children than Elon Musk, and I think it's by Eddie Murphy used to date Scary Spice at some point. I don't even know. I think they might have been married. So like, you're telling me, okay, what's the name? David Beckham, a man who's known for being hot and for being a soccer player, Spice Girl. Fucking Eddie Murphy, a man who's known for being hilarious and all the talent in the world, Spice Girl. Elon Musk, Grimes. She's got grime in her fucking name. So clearly it's not about the money. And so like, you can have $200 billion, but if you don't care about your fucking appearance, you're just going to end up with grimy women. And like, not even that many grimy women. So like,
no, you can't get with one of the Spice Girls without being down with all of her friends, right? So
exactly. But even then, that's where, man, like there's enough examples of people being together and then splitting apart. It's like clearly not all about physical attractiveness. Clearly it's not all about money. Clearly it's not all about entertainment or being able to like have talent. Because if that were the case, Lisa Bonet and Lenny Kravitz never would have broken up. And like the idea that like Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet broke up, and then she goes and hooks up with Jason Momoa. I don't know if that's, I don't know the chronology, but we all know that they're like some weird fucking poly whatever polycule that's okay with each other because they're all attractive enough and like self-confident enough to not get all petty about their relationships with each other, that I think what may be a lifetime of mistakes around those traits culminating in a mature person who doesn't let those traits dictate their lives end up looking like something completely different. So like I'm sure all of those people have had enough time period in their lives to let being attractive and being able to manipulate people through attractiveness get out of their system so much that they don't probably think about that as a thing anymore. It's like Lenny Kravitz, like other women were writing songs on Lisa Bonet's behalf because Lenny Kravitz was sleeping with so many women that they were like, who do you think you are? You ain't all that. Like, this isn't even Lisa Bonet. This is some woman who's so mad at Lenny Kravitz for like sleeping around on Lisa Bonet that she fucking wrote a song about it. And it's like, she didn't name him in the song, but it's definitely about Lenny Kravitz. He wasn't a perfect person. He went through that. He made those mistakes. But if you didn't know that he went through those mistakes, and he probably regretted them, then it's easy to look at Lenny Kravitz now and think he's still that same person who doesn't regret doing all those things and making all those mistakes and potentially ruining relationships in that pursuit of ego satisfaction. So I think that's where it's like, it's the same thing with Jason Momoa. It's like, I'm sure there was a period where, because he definitely had some issues on set where he was drinking too much and people were like calling him out on it. So I think he's past that too. So it's like, same shit with Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez, all these people go through these periods where like they've become stars or in the public eye for a number of reasons. Who knows what's the main reason, but of them, at least one of them is being known for being attractive. And so when somebody gets famous for being attractive, I can only imagine the things that does to their ego if they don't get it and keep it in check. And like, you know, they made that Community episode about it when Winger's taking the fucking Xanax and it like allows the narcissist to go unregulated. And it's like, yeah, I can only imagine someone who doesn't have either a person or some sort of experience to check them on that ego, where it just keeps snowballing out of control. And eventually that thing either destroys them or destroys somebody around them. And that's where like that can ultimately end up teaching them the lesson or not. And they just continue to destroy people. And I think a lot of those people feel like they're on the sociopath side. So that's where I'm like, it feels like Elon Musk, particularly when he was trying to pretend to be out to save the planet, and he was like, oh, what we're doing, you know, we're selling electric vehicles and we're trying to save the world and all this shit. People really believed him.
Wait, is that when he was saying he was autistic?
Yeah. He undiagnosed, but he's autistic. And so he started like taking that mantle, and then he's like, well, we need to move humanity to Mars. And people were like, okay. And so he kept getting further and further from that identity that he established. And then it got to the point where now he's like encouraging racism in the name of free speech. And he's so far from that original save the planet ideal person that he established, that it's not even remotely the same person.
Man, so on the note of Twitter and free speech, when Alexei Navalny, his wife, tried to create a Twitter account, they like isolated it and shut it down. Like, and the excuse they came up with is that there were a number of posts that flagged it as a potentially fake account.
Yeah.
Free speech.
See, that's another, but that's another issue where I don't even know where to weigh in, because it's
Exactly.
like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, of course it sucks. It's fucking obviously terrible when the opposition to a leader is being poisoned, and then you start to do your research and dude kind of looks like a Nazi, and I'm like, I mean, I definitely don't want anybody being poisoned, but I'm like, is that the only opposition they had? Like, is really the only opposition left to the gay hating status quo is like the everybody else hating challengers?
Well,
it's the same shit in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's the exact same shit in Ukraine. That's why I'm like, I just don't want anybody to be killed anymore. I can't take sides here. Just stop shooting each other. How about that? Is that an okay position to take? Just stop fucking killing each other, okay? I don't care. I'm not going to take any side. Just stop shooting. So, you know what I mean? Like, how is anybody supposed to like navigate being thrust into, then now you're supposed to have an opinion about Navalny. I don't know how exactly to say it.
No. Fuck.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
No, Naval.
Are you sure?
Navalny?
Are you sure? Because I don't speak fucking Russian.
I can't do that.
I can't read Cyrillic.
I can't do those Cyrillic rolls. I can't. There's a bunch of like extra consonants in Cyrillic that I can't do.
So I'm not even going to pretend I can pronounce that dude's name, or that other people are pronouncing it correctly when they're reporting it in the fucking Western media, because they'll just say it without knowing what the fucking real pronunciation is either. And then people will carry it. So I'm not about to like talk about this dude not knowing if anybody's pronouncing his fucking name right in American media, but willing to talk about it.
That's the thing that I found so interesting was, so they poisoned him through his balls. They like dropped nerve agent into his underwear, and he lived. And then his response is like, that was a really creative thing to try to do. There's like a really dark comedy that's happening in all of this. It's like they're like so cynical about it. The guy tried to burn him with fucking nerve agent to his balls, and he went back for more. It's just a very dark scenario playing out. But you're right. I don't know anything about what's going on in Russia because I don't read Russian. I can't speak Russian. I have no idea what they're saying. I have to believe that the translator is being accurate.
Of course. I mean, that's the only choice we have. And that's where my issue is like, on the one hand, what you just said is the only real option we have in terms of the information we're presented. But then on the other hand, we have to like be able to extrapolate and think about other possibilities that exist as to why we're being given the narrative we have. Because, I don't read Russian or read Cyrillic, anything with the Cyrillic script to like know what's being fucking said so like the idea that somebody's telling me how I should feel about something that's happening there, it's like one of the worst forms of manipulation that we constantly have to live with, which is where we got those commercials of like, the kids with the flies buzzing around them. And then, you just pay 5 cents a month or 5 cents a week and you can feed these children, not getting any sort of real explanation of what that was meant to do or how they were going to actually execute that without basically feeding these people the least amount of nutrition possible and basically just giving them rice and nothing but rice. And so like these little windows into inaccessible cultures or inaccessible nations, they haven't always been propaganda, or the one some of them aren't necessarily propaganda, but a propaganda machine will not allow them to exist within its framework unmolested. And nothing from outside our borders is going to get into our American discourse without someone trying to influence that discourse, which is, that's normal. But I think the issue becomes older people specifically, especially boomers, not understanding where that discourse is coming from or if that discourse is real. And they're, I think, the easiest to manipulate. They were the easiest to manipulate before, and because they're still alive and because they're still sitting on all the money, they're still easiest to manipulate now. And some of them think that they can like resist it, but they're all the ones who have Bitcoin investments in the wrong places because they didn't want to listen to anybody. And then they go and fucking put it in some scam exchange or some scam fucking MLM because they wanted to act like they didn't want to pay attention to something, but then they wanted to like go put money and invest in it and win and have some story to go share with people. And they were the ones to beat the system, and they just did this little extra research. And then when that shit fails, they don't tell anybody about it. So that happens on all these different fronts. But that's because they're the most easily manipulated demographic. And it's like, I don't think teenagers necessarily have enough money to be scamming like that. But if they did, they wouldn't be as dumb as the boomers to be getting scammed as frequently as they do. So
I'm pretty sure it's the teenagers doing the scamming. I mean, historically, it's always been the teenagers doing the scamming.
That's true. I mean, teenagers in early 20s. Yeah. That's definitely true. Yeah, because once again, that demographic isn't necessarily creative enough to like come up with a believable scam. If they're scamming, you're gonna know immediately because they're not good at hiding.
That's what most of YouTube feels like anymore. It's like I was saying, it's like it's a commercial nested in a dialogue, or a commercial nested in a tutorial, or a commercial nested in something else, or sometimes it's just a commercial. The whole thing's just a commercial, and I'm not sure like at what point did infotainment just become commercials? Because there still are documentaries, and I can still watch hydraulic press guy who crushes things. But that's like that's one of those weird short form entertainment things. It's instantaneously gratifying, but it has absolutely no substance to it. Like, yeah, great. Now I know that it takes more than 50,000 pounds to crush a piece of solid tungsten or cobalt or whatever it was. I don't even remember, so it wasn't even that important. It was just like, yeah, let's watch this thing get crushed and explode. I'm convinced now that short form entertainment, short form media is it's the stuff that rots minds. It robs people of their ability to form complex ideas that last longer than 15 minutes.
Especially when you throw in commercial breaks.
Oh, that's the worst. Why do they break up whatever they're talking about with some advertisement for a VPN that they damn well know nobody on YouTube is going to be buying? Nobody in a country that needs a VPN is watching American podcast tutorial videos. They're not watching synthesizer tutorial videos. They don't need it. They don't give a shit about it.
Most of those in America were aimed at people who were not illegally
watching shit they shouldn't be watching.
No. They're people who were trading on crypto platforms that they would not be able to do if they did not make it seem like they weren't in America.
Mm.
And so you get a lot of people who were like trading on Binance or trading on exchanges in Britain that are in America, or people in America trading on these international exchanges, when if they didn't change their fucking IP address, they would not legally be able to trade on these from America with that IP address. Or it's not even the regulations wouldn't permit them to do it. It's like it's not a crime, but there's certain things that you can do while trading that can then become crimes.
Yeah.
So it's like,
well, I mean, I'm just
paying taxes on the.
I'm just speaking anecdotally. I watch mostly videos about computer. Like lately, it's been about computer hardware because I'm trying to learn how to use Stable Diffusion. But mostly, it's about digital audio and synthesizers and guitars and how to play the guitar. And occasionally, I watch something about podcast production or nonlinear video editing, color grading, stuff that I would associate with content creation or being creative, in some form or another. These are all interests that are directly tied to my desire to make stuff that's entertaining. I don't need a VPN. I actually want the opposite. I want to go into isolated mode, into airplane mode, and have my computers be offline and dive deeper into whatever it is that I'm trying to be creative with. That's what I actually want. I don't want a private tunnel to some other access point. So clearly, either I need to turn on the targeted advertisement thing or the advertising ID or whatever it is, and let them actually give me something that's more relevant, or maybe their algorithms are just wrong. Or maybe there are a bunch of people who are using VPNs. You know what? I forgot, because I haven't given a shit about wares in a long time, or cracked software, any of that shit. I haven't really cared about any of it, and so I don't pay attention to any of it. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are ideologically opposed to paying for software, and so they probably need VPNs to access some kind of torrent site. I don't know.
Not necessarily opposed to it so much as it becomes an exploitative, or it became an exploitative process that didn't.
The whole subscription model for software is bullshit.
Right. When they started to shift to that, they didn't fulfill the promise of purchase that one would reasonably expect with buying something. And the when I really stopped buying software was between Reason 4 and Reason 5, or 5 and 6. It was one of the two, because they upgraded so fast that by the time I got accustomed to one, they were like already pushing the next one, and the upgrade cost money. And I'm like, if you're going to come in and add a bunch of shit and change the interface completely, people who just bought it within the last 12 months should get a free upgrade, not have to pay extra. Even if I understand there's extra things, but the release schedule just made it such that if I would have just waited, I could have gotten it for basically the same price. But then they make the upgrade such that if you had paid the original price for the previous version, then you're paying original price for both and then upgrade cost. And so it just became unreasonable for me as a customer to keep paying these kinds of like temporary entrance fees only for them to turn around and change.
Man, you can't even find a Reason installer that's prior to like version 8, I think, anymore. And even then, have fun trying to get it to authorize, because the authorization system that they used back then doesn't exist anymore. I have Reason 10, and it's like the last version, I think, that supports CodeMeter, which is a offline authorization scheme that uses a tiny server on a jump drive. And as long as I don't update the current system that I've got, I can take my current DAW offline, and all of my software will work. Actually, I need to create an offline key for my Waves plugins, and then my DAW can sit offline until the end of time in its current state and be 100% functional and not have any problems, because it doesn't have any problems. What I don't like is the pressing need to constantly maintain security updates that are like, obviously I shouldn't take my DAW online because it's a workstation. It's not supposed to be a web browser. I have a daily driver computer just for that. And I don't put anything, that I can't just replace with a cloned drive in a matter of minutes. I don't need, but the DAW, that's the thing that's constantly battling update cycles with software. Actually, it's been really stable for the past few months. I think NAMM just happened, so there's probably a whole wave of updates that are about to happen. That stuff actually sucks a lot. But I think that only affects, it affects everyone, but I think it really affects people who are trying to keep up. And instead of, as we've talked about various forms of production, like once you understand the principles behind these things, the interface is really just, it's just something that you're dealing with in the moment. But conceptually, a lot of these things are the same, and you have to look for the path of how to accomplish that goal, how to get that result, because knowing what you want to accomplish will lead you down that path. And but you're right. I think that constantly adding more features to solve a problem that probably didn't even exist, or just to make it easier to solve a problem that already has solutions, that if you know the answer, then it's easy. It's already easy. But I think that's where we get like baseline generators and chord players that just select chord progressions for you based upon whatever key you're touching. And I think that's where it's where people who want to make music but don't want to take the time to be synthesists and engage in sound design, because that shit takes fucking forever, and it's only fun for a little while, and then you forget why you were making those sounds. The next thing you know, you end up with a sound that has zero contextual relevance to the piece of music you are creating. Then I find myself making ambient music, and that's not what I was trying to do. But I think that for somebody who's really decided like, yeah, this is all I need. This is all I'm using. Once someone hits that point, then the software update cycle just becomes this nagging reminder. It's like, oh yeah, the world's still moving forward. In the last 3 years, there hasn't been anything on Reason's development output that made me say, I'm buying the next version of it. Like, and the update, even though I usually wait every couple of years, they have like a sale, and it's like, oh yeah, I can update to the latest version for like $100 or $70 or whatever. There hasn't been enough of an update to the whole thing to make me say, I need this. Because none of the stuff that they've added solves a problem that I have. And do I really need to spend the time to learn a whole different version of synthesis right now? No, I don't have time for that in this moment. But that whole subscription model, that just preys on people who have to have the latest version. They have to have version X.9 dot something else, because, you know, X.8 dot something else wasn't good enough, even though it was probably stable.
Well, and I understand when the drivers get updated so frequently and you have to like keep up with it, but a lot of that is third party shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was just reading about. Okay, so Intel has been doing all these like optimizations for, you know, all the games, and the one that the big one is Starfield, because Starfield is still in development. It's a really ambitious game. It's really pretty. It's a beautiful game, and they released an update to their ARC drivers for their fancy card that solved a lot of problems, and all of a sudden it was very stable. But they said that, you know, the problem with that is that it's a moving target, whereas a lot of other third-party development is happening on very well-established engines, and so it's easier to fine-tune. And that's the kind of thing also that I find really interesting. It's like, when was being a unpaid beta? Oh no, a pay-to-play beta tester. When was that normalized? Because I see a lot of games. I've tried a lot of games in the past few months where if I had just wanted to play longer than the demo, you know, I still would have been playing a game that's essentially in public beta.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when.
It's been a while, because I've downloaded and played so many games on like Steam or Epic or GOG or whatever, like for like 30 minutes, just to end up feeling like, no wonder it's free on Amazon Prime Gaming. I shouldn't complain. There's a lot of really good stuff on Amazon's gaming Discord, whatever, Twitch thing. Like, I enjoyed Shaq Fu way more than I thought I was going to. And I had completely avoided that game for like what seemed like forever.
Well, there's certain, you know, like the original Sonic games, some of them had enough game design in the original, you know, 16-bit version that now you can still play it and it's still fun.
Yeah. Also, that game is so fast-paced that you don't really have time to look at anything.
Well, when it's on a bigger screen now, because we used to have to play on
that's true.
Screens.
Oh man! Speaking of which, I installed Dolphin on my daily driver computer, and I loaded up a version of Super Mario Sunshine, and then I started, you know, dialing it in. I had never seen that game at that high of a resolution. I didn't realize that they had packed so much information into each frame. like into all of the polygons, like all of the polygons that are present. All of that stuff smooths out, and the characters look amazing in high definition, in like 1080p and in 1440p. I did not realize that those Nintendo games could look like that. So I'm actually kind of excited because I'm going to fire up Metroid and see what it looks like. I'm kind of on a Nintendo gaming kick, like an emulator gaming kick right now.
Yeah, a lot of those old games, you know, oh, especially on Super Nintendo, um, they were made. I think they were running at 120 frames in some of them, so
Yeah,
they're gonna look really good on modern machines.
like really good. And also like without any RAM limitations, just render the whole environment. All of I'm seeing effects in the background of the frame now that we're like, huh, that must have been one of those like to be perceived, not actually seen type things, and now it's actually rendering. It's actually really
That
impressive what they were able to accomplish back then.
that they were able to put things in that your machine wasn't able to render until like decades later.
Yeah. Fucking Easter eggs. That's what those are. Those are like the little sprites that you don't see. It's just a little flash in the normal game, but then in the modern or in the super powered variation of GameCube, all of a sudden you can tell that it's actually like a little flying thing. Go Nintendo, go, man! That just like makes me want to see what else is going on. You know what else is kind of like crazy to me is how small those games are. Like some GameCube games were only a couple hundred megabytes. And that just
They
speaks to
had to,
the efficiency of the coding.
yeah, they had to do a lot with a little.
I mean, it's just incredible what they were able to just cram in there. I'm sure that there's a lot of like upsampling and interpolation going on with a more advanced computing system, but still, those games are so tiny. And like some of the videos that I watched of some games that I did not select, some of that stuff looks good now, like really good now, like the polygons. And I think a lot of it comes down to the character or the sprite design and the way they design those little characters as they move around. Like they had to be, I guess they had to be more deliberate because they couldn't rely on really advanced GPUs because they just didn't exist.
Well, and this is like, unfortunately, one of the benefits of pre-internet times was that they weren't able to like push downloaded content and quote unquote fix a game after they had already released it. So they had to push it. It was either working or it was going to be broken forever.
Yeah.
And I think, enough people didn't want their name tied to like broken properties that they ended up finishing whatever they were making, I don't know if it was under duress or just because they got enough resources, one of the two. Probably the latter, but you know
Well,
that
like so, Ace Combat 7, when it was released, it had higher requirements than it does now. They've managed to make that game work on lower tier hardware and run better, like on the good stuff. So there are some benefits to this model, I guess. But you're right. There's something to be said for a fully realized game that's not released until it's working right. And then the few glitches that do exist, people they find them and then they share them and can capitalize on this in gameplay. It's like, yeah, we left that in there because we figured if anyone found it, they might actually appreciate it. Well, that stuff's cool.
Well, and that's like the speed running phenomenon of like, if they wanted to, developers could take out the speed run once people discovered it and just like code it out. But they've embraced that, where it's like, if you can find something that we kind of overlooked or whatever, then go for it.
Yeah, it's not treated as a bug or a hole in the software. It's treated as oh, you found something. Well, good for you. Enjoy. That's cool. Because it doesn't hurt the software. It just alters it. It's like a benign bug or something. It's just a firefly. It's not going to hurt anything. It doesn't cause any problems. They don't even smell bad. But still, you know, if a company like Microsoft can figure out how to make, you know, installing Windows and getting it authorized essentially painless, virtually effortless, then I think there's actually hope. There's got to be a way that forcing the user base to function, the installed user base to function as a unpaid public beta, or, you know, give them discount pricing at release time. I participated in a public beta, and in the end, all of the software that they let people use, they took away. And then they said, oh yeah, now if you want to use our GPU assisted audio processing, you got to buy a Vienna Suite VSL Orchestra. It's like $1,500. Bastards.
I think it was like $7,000 at some point.
Yeah, VSL is like one of those insane software packages. Fuck that.
Well, and it was so prohibitively expensive. I remember that was one of the last pieces of software I bothered to pirate just to see if I could. And it wasn't easy. They definitely made it difficult.
No, that was one of those software platforms where they put every type of security measure in they possibly could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bastards.
But pirates always find a way.
Yeah.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.